Voice of the People podcast. I'm your host, Lawrence Dixon. And as always, thank you for your time and supporting and listening. I truly appreciate it. Today's show is entitled Qualified Immunity. Judge Les Hayes' retirement was effective on July 2nd. He served 20 years in a municipal court. He was appointed by Mayor Bobby Bright in 2000 in Montgomery, Alabama. In 2016, Hayes was suspended from the bench after the Judicial Inquiry Commission filed a complaint for prior practices of overseeing and participating in a court system that routinely incarcerated traffic offenders and misdemeanors, many of whom were indigent. Now, there's a company called Judicial Correction Services Private Probation Company. They were established in 2001. The company acts as a self-funding probation agency for courts, which are mostly located in the South. Now, I'm going to refer to them as JCS. Now, they offered alternatives to incarceration, which include halfway houses, probation services, and electric monitoring. On the outside, it seems like a great idea and a good alternative to incarceration. In July 2012, Alabama Judge Hub Harrington accused JCS of egregious abuses which were akin to debtor's prison and an extortion racket condoned by elected officials of Harpersville, Alabama, in their aggressive pursuit of fines owed to Harpersville Municipal Court. Now, if a person is sentenced to probation/parole for a misdemeanor, such as an inability to pay traffic fines, JCS ensures the probationer meets all probation/parole conditions as well as pay fines and various fees in addition to the traffic fines that provides a significant profit for JCS. U.S. states like Alabama delegated tremendous coercive power to companies like JCS, and they were subjected to very little, if no, oversight and regulation. These probation companies acted more like abusive debt collectors. Often, poor people were more likely to pay companies like these and more likely to wind up behind bars when they couldn't pay. JCS operated in Montgomery, Alabama when Judge Les Hayes was on the bench. And from Judge Hayes' track record, it's obvious that he shared the same sentiment as JCS. Judge Les Hayes once sentenced a single mother to 496 days behind bars for failing to pay a traffic ticket. 500 days. 496, might as well say 500, for failing to pay traffic tickets. The sentence exceeded the jail time in Alabama for negligent homicide. I can't imagine going to court for unpaid traffic tickets and probably thinking, maybe they'll give me more time, maybe I can get community service or something like that. I can't imagine going to court for that and a judge telling me you got 496 days. Marquita Johnson, who was locked up in April of 2012, says the impact of her jail time still endures today. This single mother, her 3 children were cast into foster care while she was incarcerated. One daughter was molested, state records show. Another was physically abused. I don't have the words to even articulate or describe a situation like that. Like I said, I can't imagine this woman being given 496 days behind bars, her children taken away from her and no one finding anything wrong with that. These babies were taken from their mom, put into a system, and put in harm's way when they should have been home with their mom. Judge Hayes took away my life and didn't care how my children suffered, said Johnson. My girls will never be the same. And that's the truth. Fellow inmates found her sentence hard to believe. They nicknamed her the woman with all the days. You know, that's one thing about jail and prison. You know, a lot of the inmates, they know the sentencing guidelines better than the judges. You know, they'll be able to tell you if you got a deal or if you got what you deserved. And they called her the woman with all the days. And there were people in jail with her who had committed serious crimes who got out before she did. Again, I mean, my heart goes out to that woman and her daughters. And this is something that will forever be a stain in their lives. In 2016, the state agency that oversees judges charged Hayes with violating Alabama's Code of Judicial Conduct. According to the Judicial Inquiry Commission, Hayes broke state and federal laws by jailing Johnson and hundreds of other Montgomery residents too poor to pay fines. Among some of those who were jailed was a plumber who was struggling to make rent, a mother who skipped meals to cover the medical bills of her disabled son, and a hotel housekeeper working her way through college. The majority of the people who were sentenced under Judge Hayes were African Americans. Hayes, a judge since 2000, admitted in court documents to violating 10 different parts of the state's Judicial Conduct Code. This is written documentation, okay? One of the counts was a breach of a judge's most essential duty, failing to respect and comply with the law. Despite the severity of the ruling, Hayes wasn't barred from serving as a judge. Instead, the Judicial Commission and Hayes reached a deal. He would serve an 11-month unpaid suspension, and then he would return to the bench. That's ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous. Until he was disciplined, Hayes said in an interview, "I never thought I was doing anything wrong." Hayes further said he was very remorseful for his misdeeds. Hayes is among thousands of state and local judges across America who are allowed to keep positions of extraordinary power and prestige after violating judicial ethics rules or breaking laws they pledged to uphold. Judges have made racist statements, lied to officials, and forced defendants to languish in jail without a lawyer, and then they return to the bench like nothing happened, sometimes with little more than a rebuke from the state agencies overseeing their conduct. In comprehensive accounting of judicial misconduct nationally, 1,509 cases from the last dozen years, 2008 through 2019, in which judges resigned, retired, or were publicly disciplined following accusations of misconduct. In addition, another 3,613 cases from 2008 to 2018, in which states disciplined wayward judges but kept hidden from the public key details of their offenses, including the identities of the judges themselves. All total, about 9 out of every 10 judges was allowed to return to the bench after they were sanctioned for misconduct. This included a California judge who had sex in his courthouse chambers, once with a former law intern and separately with an attorney, was a New York judge who berated domestic violence victims, a Maryland judge who, after his arrest for drunk driving, was allowed to return to the bench provided he took a breathalyzer test before each appearance. You know, if you or I get arrested for drunk driving, there's a huge possibility that we could lose our jobs. You're definitely going to have to spend major coins with the ticket and the classes and the things of that nature. There's excessively forgiving judicial disciplinary systems, said Stephen Gillers. He's a law professor at New York University who writes about judicial ethics. Although punishment short of removal from the bench is appropriate for most misconduct cases, Gillers said, the public will be appalled at some of the lenient treatment judges get for substantial transgressions. Among some cases from the past couple of years, in Utah, a judge texted a video of a man's scrotum to court clerks. He was reprimanded but remains on the bench. In Indiana, 3 judges attending a conference last spring got drunk and sparked a 3 a.m. brawl outside of a White Castle restaurant. It ended up with 2 of the judges getting shot. And the state Supreme Court found the 3 judges had discredited the entire Indiana judiciary system. Each returned to the bench after a suspension. Now this one takes the cake. In Texas, a judge burst in on jurors deliberating the case of a woman who was charged with sex trafficking, and he declared that God Almighty told him that the defendant was innocent. This dude gets up from the bench, busts into the jury room, talking about God said. The offending judge received a warning, returned to the bench. The defendant was convicted after a new judge took over the case. As in most states, Alabama's 9-member Judicial Inquiry Commission is a mix of lawyers, judges, and lay people. And of course, they are all appointed. Their deliberations are secret and they operate under some of the most judge-friendly rules in the nation, Alabama's rules make even filing a complaint against a judge difficult. The complaint must be notarized, and in theory, because it's notarized, anyone who makes misstatements about a judge can be prosecuted for perjury. Complaints about wrongdoing must be made in writing. Those that arrive by phone, email, or without a notary stamp don't get investigated. The senders are notified as to why their complaints were rejected. Anonymous written complaints are tossed in the trash can. You know, these rules will leave lawyers and litigants fearing retaliation. It's a ridiculous system that protects judges and makes it easy for them to intimidate anyone with a legitimate complaint. This is what Sue Bell Cobb said. She was Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court from 2007 to 2011. In 2009, she unsuccessfully championed changes to the process and commissioned an American Bar Association report that offered a scathing review of Alabama's rules. In other states, commission staff members can start investigating a judge after receiving a phone call or email, even an anonymous tip, or after learning of questionable conduct from a news report or a court filing. Not in Bama. In good old Alabama, the state will not begin an investigation without approval from the commission itself. And get this, the commission convenes about every 7 weeks. By rule, the commission also must keep a judge who is under scrutiny fully informed throughout the investigation. If a subpoena is issued, the judge receives a Simultaneous copy, raising fears about witness intimidation. If a witness gives investigators a statement, the judge receives a transcript. In the U.S. justice system, such difference to individuals under investigation, it doesn't happen. I'm not even going to say extremely rare. It doesn't happen. Why the need for special rules for judges? Michael Levy, Washington lawyer who has represented clients in high-profile criminal, corporate, and congregational and securities investigations. If judges think it's fair and appropriate to investigate others for crimes or misconduct without providing those subjects or targets with copies of witness statements and subpoenas, why don't judges think it's fair to investigate judges in the same way? Alabama judges are also given the opportunity to resolve investigations confidentially. Commission's records show the commission has met with judges informally at least 20 times since 2011 to offer corrective guidance. You know, I wish I could break the law and go to court and get some corrective guidance. The identities of those judges remain confidential, as does the conduct that promoted the meeting. The director, whose name is Garrett, he said not every violation warrants discipline. Now, I say this based on the fact that the percentage of judicial and law enforcement officers are predominantly white males. Qualified immunity for them is white privilege on steroids. It protects judges and law enforcement officials from being held personally liable for constitutional violations. There's no ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. Qualified immunity must be abolished. For every judge that is allowed to manipulate qualified immunity for their own personal use, there is a tragic story of a victim and a family who suffer behind their unconstitutional actions. And yeah, you know, real talk, if someone breaks the law, they deserve to be punished, as long as the punishment fits the crime. When that doesn't happen, the true crime lies in not holding judges accountable for their deplorable behavior. Qualified immunity, we have to get that off the books. Point blank and a period. Thank you for listening. As always, I appreciate you. You know, this story, it saddens me. Truly, truly saddens me. Voice of the People podcast. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube. I need for everybody to wash your hands thoroughly, wear mask, protect yourself, and until next time, be safe.